Kara Frederick, I'm so glad to have you on the program today here on the Cain Podcast. You just said you didn't think I'd follow up, but in a 3-minute conversation on Fox and Friends, I mean, the nice way to put it would be I left intrigued. The more accurate way to put it is I left our conversation terrified. So let's just pick up on that emotion. Why should I be terrified of TikTok?
How much time do you have? There's a litany of reasons for this. And I think that the easiest way to sort of put it is it's basically a Chinese Communist Party controlled app. So if you want to, have a minimal digital footprint, if you want to just watch videos and not be worried that the Chinese Communist Party is spying on you or could potentially spy on your kids or your relatives or any person who is a contact in your phone, then I would say, TikTok is not for you because at this point, I think what TikTok is, everyone is aware of it. And the action that we are not taking, especially policy-wise, is something that people are, they're willfully, pulling the wool over their eyes at this point. But it is a Chinese Communist Party spy app. You can use it for surveilling Americans, for finding their locations, and actually targeting Americans' physical locations in this way, accessing their data, and on and on and on. So if you don't want to be spied on by a foreign adversary of the United States of America, then don't use TikTok.
Okay. I actually don't want to take for granted that everyone out there knows exactly what is TikTok. And you just explained it to us. That is it a Chinese Communist Party app for spying on Americans? I want to take that piece by piece if we can. First, what makes TikTok a subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yep. So it all has to do with the legal atmosphere of China versus, say, what the legal atmosphere in America is like. So you have TikTok, and it is what we call sort of an American version. There's a Chinese version as well called Douyin, and that's not available here in America. That's what kids in China use. And they have a parent company in common called ByteDance. Now, ByteDance is a corporation that is incorporated in Beijing. It's headquartered in Beijing. And every ostensibly private company in China is subject to their laws. And one of their laws is the 2017 National Intelligence Act, which basically says that any private company, if the state, what we call the party split state, that's China, if the state has use for any information or frankly anything the private company does, then that private company must support the state in this endeavor. So essentially, it basically says if we have a quote unquote national security reason for reaching out to you as a private company or accessing data that you have as a private company, we can do it. So any private company in China is really a state company under this particular law. And then there's gradations of additional laws as well, like the 2017 cybersecurity law, which also pretty much says as much. It basically is, a vague statute that allows for anyone in power in the party to reach into these private companies and take whatever they want from them. So if you have a company that is headquartered in Beijing, subject to Beijing's laws, and it's the parent company of the other subsidiary, the company TikTok, then that means that ByteDance can effectively do whatever it wants with TikTok's data, and it does, as we've seen in especially recent reporting from BuzzFeed and Forbes.
So I want to ask you functionally how that works, and forgive the big buildup here, but is it that the Chinese Communist Party can at any time make a demand of ByteDance and then therefore TikTok for information, or is it that, and I'm going to go ahead and try to answer my own question, but I'm going to let you respond here. Is it that a member of the Chinese Communist Party also has to sit on the board, for example, of ByteDance? So when the executive of TikTok, I believe this is correct, and I know you will know the right answer. When the executive of TikTok appears before the United States Congress and says, no, we don't share information with the Chinese Communist Party, they can play a semantic game in that, no, we don't turn over information directly to the Chinese government. We don't turn over information directly to the Chinese Communist Party, but they turn it over to a board member who is a member of both of those parties.
That's part of it too, and that's an important data point. So there is a formal relationship there that they've tried to obfuscate, and we have access to leaked internal TikTok documents that says the way that we want to play this in public is to obfuscate that connection between ByteDance and TikTok, and that board member is an important data point, as I said before. And then there's two other issues at play here too. It's how you access the data. So we know through leaked audio files that Chinese engineers working for ByteDance have access to U.S. user data from TikTok. So these engineers can effectively just go into the system and look at U.S. user data, and they have. We know that from reporting from BuzzFeed, and that was that leaked audio where Chinese engineers from ByteDance actually accessed multiple times U.S. user data, Americans' data from TikTok. So there's kind of that fluidity there as well as, like you said, the party official that sits on the board of ByteDance. You also, through additional reporting, these were reporters who were at BuzzFeed and now at Forbes. They know that ByteDance planned to target the locational information of U.S. journalists, 2 to 3 journalists, depending on who you talk to, using their IP addresses, because they have TikTok accounts. So that's another thing as well. And then the third thing that I think people don't really, it doesn't really spring to mind because it's a little more sort of squishy and less sort of hard data access, cyber concerns issues. It's leverage over people with access to the data. So if, you have an engineer in Singapore working at TikTok and they have family members who are in China, the Chinese party state can lean on those family members for potential access to data in that way as well. So there's a number of vectors that they can get data. Another one is we know that at least 300 self-reported users on LinkedIn who work at ByteDance, and therefore, and TikTok as well, actually, said that they had worked for Chinese propaganda arms. They had been part of the state media and whatnot. So they're going to retain those connections as well. So it's a data access game, and it's a leverage over people game too, as well as a party official game. So there's all sorts of vectors that you can, frankly, have your data as a U.S. user of TikTok compromised by the CCP's many, many tentacles.
Well, Kara, then therefore, with all those different, to use your word, vectors and how the Chinese Communist Party can, and the Chinese authoritarian government can exercise control over TikTok and ByteDance and use it as a spying tool, is there anything then, therefore, that makes TikTok uniquely dangerous to Americans? What I'm getting at is, I would think then any Chinese company would satisfy almost every one of the vectors you just described. So in essence, if you're in business with a Chinese company, for those same reasons, you're in business with the Chinese Communist Party.
Yep. And that's huge. And that's one of the reasons why we prohibited Huawei from being built into our next generation wireless networks, because we know that there are some issues like backdoor issues, like bug door issues, which are programming software vulnerabilities into the system so that they can be enacted at a later date. So that, yes, if you're doing business with a Chinese company, you always run that risk. I think what differentiates TikTok is the scale. And this is, again, something that I don't think enough people appreciate, but you have 2/3 of American teenagers on this application. You have the amount of American adults who are getting their news from this application having tripled in the last 2 years. The scale with which even preteens, a Pew poll had polled parents, and they said, what applications are your preteens using? And this is 9 to 11-year-olds. 30% of parents said, and this is back in 2021, said that their preteens are using TikTok. So they've got their hooks into the next generation. It's comparable to Huawei with next generation wireless and 5G and whatnot. But when you think of this, it's less of that hard cyber concerns and more the information environment. So then, the data is also an issue too. We know that Facebook, that YouTube, that other applications that you put on your phone, that Twitter, they're mining your data. They're exploiting a lot of your data. You don't really have the data privacy that you're promised. But at the same time, TikTok is also very very, very good at this. They monitor your keystroke, how you touch the keyboard if you're using it on a desktop, and how you touch your keypad if you're using it on your mobile app. So as a mobile app, it is. People say that commercial surveillance is sort of the same across the board, and there are other companies that do worse. But TikTok is. They have a fulsome data exploitation operation that I think makes other companies pale in comparison.
Okay, I want to get into that in just one moment, but for a minute now, I want to back up and I want to build up, ask you about your history and your ability to speak with this on expertise. So I gave a short introduction, and in your and my short conversation together, I know that you worked for the NSA. Can you tell us what you did that gives you particular insight? I know you quoted several pieces of reporting there, but I know you have firsthand experience as well. What did you do with the NSA?
Yeah, so I was basically a liaison for 2 years at the National Security Agency on loan from another agency, and I was a targeter. So what we did, we did counterterrorism analysis. We looked at Al-Qaeda in this instance, and we developed a digital profile of these guys, and basically figured out their pattern of life, and found ways to point the good guys in the direction of the bad guys. I did it in Afghanistan for 3 deployments with Special Operations Forces, and worked for a small Special Operations unit as well, in a sense, in a digital sense. So my background is basically developing targets, so effectively surveillance. So knowing how these things work, and knowing how to essentially find needles in haystacks, and by developing the pattern of life of certain individuals, finding out their location, finding out their networks, finding out how they behave online, and figuring out where they are at that moment, at that time.
Wow. So you know something about surveillance. Now, I also want to ask you another question that's elementary, but I also don't want to take it for granted. Will you distinguish for me the difference between the role, because I think it's elementary, but I also think it's a little bit blurred at this point as well, the role of the NSA versus the CIA or the FBI?
Yep. So I technically worked for the Department of Defense. Which was a separate entity from all of that. Got my paycheck from DoD. And when we worked at NSA and we're sort of sitting there with the targeters and the linguists and whatnot, what you do is you look at, you're doing foreign intelligence surveillance, and it's signals intelligence. So you're looking at things that happen online. Before, we looked at a lot of cell phone stuff, and now you're sort of looking at how people use these digital networks through their laptops, through computers, how they connect online, and whatnot. So we have a foreign signals intelligence remit over at NSA. The CIA, what they like to say is they write for the president. Their customer is the president. So while NSA has many customers, DoD, I was a full DoD body sitting at NSA. They write for the Secretary of Defense. That's their primary customer. The warfighter is also their primary customer as well. CIA writes for the president, and they do human intelligence. So they do sort of have other bodies from other intelligence agencies who do the other ints sitting there and helping them do their work. But their bread and butter is the human sources and human targeting. So, and they also have the foreign intelligence remit as well. And then the FBI, they're supposed to deal domestically. So whenever there's say a lone wolf actor who sets off a dumpster bomb in Times Square, the FBI should be on the case because that's sort of domestic. And then the CIA finds if there's any foreign connections, if he has any relatives in Syria who are helping him with operational planning or wherever, the threat emanated from. And then the NSA will effectively, a way of putting it is scanning his communications, his signals intelligence to try to figure out, where he came from, who he's working with, if he's planning another one, and how he did it, et cetera, et cetera. So you have foreign, CIA, NSA, CIA human, NSA signals, FBI, all things domestic.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm just going to follow my own curiosity along that trail for a second. But isn't it true that, for example, within the DoD, each of the military branches would also have their own signal intelligence divisions? I I happen to know at least that's true for a couple of the branches. And then I don't know if the CIA is completely out of the game of signal intelligence. And by the way, when we use that term signal intelligence, we're talking about internet, cell phone, digital data footprints.
Yep, and you could get even as esoteric as things like MASINT and ELINT, so electronic communications if you're on sort of a ship in the ocean or in a submarine, those emanations, I won't get too nerdy, but satellites as well. So signals intelligence encompasses all of that sort of digital exhaust. So
am I right in saying I'm doubtful the CIA is completely out of the game of signal intelligence and that the military also has their divisions that do signal intelligence? So how does that coordinate, or how does that work, or how does the hierarchy work with the NSA?
Yeah, there's different degrees of coordination. And I'm also, very mindful of, of what I say here and making sure that we are above board with all of this and not sort of giving our enemies fodder. But I think when it comes to as I said before, there are degrees of gradation when it comes to these. So yes, military commands and services have their own military intelligence officers who also specialize in signals intelligence and specific areas of signals intelligence at that. And then, we will say the other governmental organization has a people that specialize in this as well, and then the National Security Agency, though, I would say is the premier signals intelligence agency that the U.S. has to offer. When they want those guys to get Bin Laden, they call the NSA.
Okay, so with that background, your expertise is well verified to talk about the threat that the Chinese Communist Party and TikTok in particular present to Americans. But one more on background before we go back into TikTok. Is there anything that TikTok is doing, and by extension, therefore, that the Chinese Communist Party is doing, that is truly unique? And I'm going to ask this, and it may sound jaded or it may sound loaded, but that is truly unique from what we are doing. Is the NSA not involved, even though its charter, even though its mandate is foreign, we don't even have to pretend, or we don't have to do the hypothetical of whether or not the NSA is involved in signal intelligence when it comes to American companies or American users. But aren't they doing the same thing with foreign users of YouTube or Facebook or whatever it may be? What I'm getting at, and I'm not trying to measure the threat, we're going to get to that in a moment, but is what TikTok and the Chinese Communist Party doing unique from, for example, what the United States government and intelligence agencies are also doing?
My answer here would be that yes, because they're good at it.
And we're not?
We've tried. The degree of, I would say, influence operations that China is able to conduct here in the United States is, I would say, vastly more effective than our mixed record from the U.S. Outward. So it's effectively me trying to be funny, but I think what my knowledge is a bit stale given my last rotation at NSA was years and years ago, and we dealt mostly with a different type of communications rather than social media. I was actually at a big tech company when these intelligence agencies started using what we call OSINT, open source information, to get to bolster their analysis and to conduct analysis, frankly, and make assessments from there. But we do have our own capabilities. Some of those have been publicized. The New York Times had a pretty interesting rundown of one of our say offensive cyber operations that involved ISIS a few years back. So we are, I wouldn't say what we're doing is particularly intense, but I would say that what China is doing to us is much worse, much more widespread, and frankly, much more fulsome. So when you look at what they've done in terms of combining their influence operations with their hacking operations, which is the big thing that I'm afraid of, because we know their hacking operations have been being conducted in earnest for a very long time. They were behind the Marriott hack. State-linked Chinese actors were behind the Equifax hack, Anthem hack. So you have all of seemingly disparate data sets, where certain people stay, and how, when they go to specific locations, given their hotel information, some of their history. Frankly, 23andMe was affiliated with China for a little bit of time. So if you do your DNA, you want to be aware that that's not sitting in a data set somewhere with access to it by CCP linked actors, or you look at, so you have health, you have hotel, you have money, you have the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management database was hacked. You look at all of these seemingly disparate data sets, and you're able to, if they're able to integrate them. And they actually have the capabilities and the technology to sort of parse through all of this integrated and fused data and arrive at conclusions and extract value from these data sets that have been fused together. It's essentially what we did as targeters. We looked at specific data sets, put them all together, and then picked out, using specific technologies, recognized patterns, picked out, individuals who had been flagged to us by machines, et cetera, et cetera. So then you add the TikTok layer over that, and not just the data layer, but what they're doing, in the information environment by getting into the heads of our kids and pumping social contagions through their algorithms. Then you basically have, I would say a weapon that we have not yet seen, and to my knowledge right now, being on the outside of the intelligence community, don't know that we wield against our adversaries at all. Or even, we don't know if we could, frankly, at this point.
I get some of the differentiating factors. First of all, I want to say the coordination, the symbiotic relationship between government and a particular political party and the private enterprise that is ByteDance is irreplicable. I want to say that, but I don't know that I can, Kara, when I see the Twitter files released and the extent to which the FBI and the American government and intelligence agencies have been involved in American technology companies. But I do get that you're telling me, look, I really am, and I'm only following my own curiosity here for a moment, because I do believe there is us and them. There are, competing interests, and, the point isn't moral relativism. Well, they do it and we do it, so none of it can be condemned. It's really rather like maybe all of it should be condemned, or who is good at this and who is bad at this. So I really am interested in, because we're going to talk, you and I here, and everybody's beginning to get aware of the extent of the spying operations of TikTok and then, therefore, China. But I really am curious about whether or not we're doing the same. I got to be honest, my assumption is yes. And I hear you saying there's scale, there's competency, there's perhaps a little bit more ease of influence and leverage within the private companies. But I got to think we're doing this. We're doing it in Europe. We're doing it in the Middle East. We may be doing it in Oklahoma.
Well, and I will say, when I got involved in the intelligence community, it was in, January of 2010. I got out of grad school and went bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to serve my country. Within 6 months, I was deployed to Afghanistan, did 2 more deployments after that. And the landscape has changed considerably since then. And I used to tell people, the big difference between what China is doing with their consolidation of power, especially in a digital sense in their social credit system, it can't be replicated here because we have a very strong bulwark, and that is our open society, our different sense of governance, our free press, our engaged citizenry, an independent judiciary. And since I started saying those things 3 years ago, it appears that, that bulwark is crumbling to a degree. And we've seen, example after example, when it comes to our 2-tier justice system. We have political prisoners rotting in Washington, D.C. for being in the vicinity of the Capitol. We have, online, as the Twitter files have revealed, this collusion between government actors. Adam Schiff, just in the recent Twitter drop, dropped, tried to get a Twitter files dropped, tried to get a journalist purged from the platform because he didn't like what he was saying. We have conservatives treated much differently on these supposedly free speech platforms, and working with the government who's singling out specific accounts to ban, suspend, and permanently kick off these platforms. So I do think that that the contours of what China does to their own people are being replicated to a degree here. I don't think that's a bombastic statement. I think Americans are sleepwalking into a social credit system. We can go through why that's happening, and we need to keep our eyes open. Good on people like Elon Musk for exposing this, but frankly, I haven't seen consequences yet. And I know it's still early, but we can talk and talk and talk all about how this is a potential violation of the First Amendment, the government working with private companies to censor the speech of Americans, the legitimate speech of Americans. But until somebody is hauled off in handcuffs for this, then they're going to keep doing it because there is no deterrence.
Wow. Okay. I hate to keep bearing this, and I hope that anybody listening sticks around, because the conversation that Kara and I had on Fox and Friends, where she revealed to me, and she's hinted at it in this conversation, the extent to which TikTok spies on your kids, meaning the actual tools, and you, for that matter, of going into your phone and taking information you have to stick around for. But because this is the way I converse, I've got to follow the lead when you give it to me. So, Kara, tell me what you mean. We are, as Americans, sleepwalking into a social credit system. Explain a social credit score system and how we're sleepwalking into it in America.
Yeah, so China basically ran a pilot system in specific provinces. Their region called Xinjiang, which your viewers, your listeners should probably know. This is where they have their infamous re-education camps of the Uyghur minorities. So effectively, they have concentration camps for religious minorities in this specific region in China, and they're using that as a digital test bed for the rest of China, because their MO is first and foremost internal stability, right? So they're trying to, they're using, frankly, the justification of terrorism to imprison a population of people, the religious minority that I talked about, and they're using their digital tools to sort of find these multimodal profiles of them, 360-degree captures of the way they walk, how much toilet paper they use. It's a combination of human intelligence and signals intelligence to get these patterns of life of these people to keep them down, to keep them under their social control. And that's the most intense bit that they have, and that's confined, it's not confined, it's leaking out, but that was, I would say, it's most intense in the Xinjiang region. In other provinces, they have something called the social credit system, which at the beginning was sort of a series of red lists, sort of gray listing. If you jaywalked or got specific sort of marks against your record, it could prevent you from getting things like train tickets, government subsidies, specific jobs, and whatnot. So the idea
now, how does that follow you as you get those dings or demerits on your record, and then I try to go buy a train ticket? How does that follow me, my trail of behavior?
Yeah, so it stays with you for as long as these systems are active. And they're not perfect. There's still some kinks that they need to work out at local levels and national levels. They don't necessarily integrate all of this data seamlessly. But I think the best way of explaining it is when COVID happened, they have codes, so color codes. So if you flash red, you cannot go anywhere. If your indicator is green, then you can, walk through doors, you can leave, you can travel, you can go to train stations and whatnot. So,
but wait, real quick. So, Kara, I show up at a restaurant, for example, and this happened during COVID in New York City. I show up at a restaurant and I have to show my vaccination card. At some point, everybody in America had it on their phone in the form of a photo, right? Which was easily manipulatable. It was very rudimentary there in New York. So how would that have worked, that social credit system in China, in a more sophisticated environment? Is it based on the phone? So if you are in China, you show up, you show your phone that has your digital ID on it, and then all of this information about you shows up and dictates what your behavioral permissions are, what you can do?
So it's a little different for the COVID issue in particular, and the red, the green, the yellow, and whatnot. It's a QR code. So it's a QR code based sort of, okay, you want to walk through the specific checkpoint. Your QR code is effectively, it's coded as a color. And if you're red, you have to stay behind. If you're green, you can sort of move forward. In Xinjiang, they had a thing called the Integrated Joint Operations Platform, and due to some of the, frankly, intrepid reporting from places like Human Rights Watch and people who were actually there on the ground, they were able to reverse engineer this app, and it is an application that police use sort of on their phones, on their mobile devices. So there's different ways of doing it. They haven't perfected it. It's not like there's this one perfect mechanism. I say IJOP, the Integrated Joint Operations Platform, is as close as it comes so far. But what I see happening is something like the Integrated Joint Operations Platform sort of spreading across mainland China. And, you know, the pilot programs have, again, traces of that kind of thing. Xinjiang's different because it's for a very specific purpose, but internal stability, internal control, social control is what the party state is trying to do to Chinese citizens. And I wouldn't be surprised if it intensifies in these other areas as well, because we already know it's a surveillance state.
How are we sleepwalking into that in America?
Yep. So this is what's interesting. The social credit system in China, it started out as a financial system through private companies like Alibaba, like Sesame in China. And what they did is sort of akin to a credit score in America, like something an American bank would have. Now, what we're seeing is ideology sort of infect the payment applications, fundraising applications, banks in America here, digitized versions of them. So I think PayPal is a great example of this. We're going to withhold $2,500 from your account if you spread harmful misinformation. We know that they've suspended accounts of people who are heterodox thinkers, people who contend with the narrative, frankly, of what the administration wants to sort of put out to the American people. So there's sort of a payment apparatus that is being starting to act like the payment apparatus in China. If you disagree with the party state, then you don't get a loan. You know, you don't get subsidies. Your bank account is suddenly drained. Frankly, we saw this in Canada with the Freedom Convoy. People who disagreed with the government, they found their bank accounts drained. And you know, to a lesser degree, like I said, some of those fundraising apps, GoFundMe, they did that to the Freedom Convoy as well. If you remember the brouhaha around the money that Americans or on this American app GoFundMe donated to the Canadian truckers, GoFundMe said, oh, we're not going to dispense this money. We're going to give it to charities of our choice. They got some backlash. They said, no, you're going to get your money back. It's that kind of thing. So it's actually your access to payments, your access to banks, again, at a more intense degree than those fundraising platforms like PayPal. So that's one aspect of it.
Yeah, and those were, so let me try to, so those were sort of at least this is the perception from the outside, those were sort of ad hoc private enterprises integrating their own ideologies or submitting to pressure, social pressure, mob pressure, advertiser pressure, governmental pressure, to begin to enact social policies on their platform. Who knows why PayPal tried to slip that $2,500 misinformation fine into their terms of service? We should find out. How did that come about? I have no doubt that the Canadian government's influence, muscle over GoFundMe or others affected the ability or the desires of those companies to distribute money to the Canadian Truckers Convoy. But still, that seems to me on the outside a little bit ad hoc, Kara. How does it get to sort of this? In the end state, in my vision, is a cohesive system of a social credit score that takes into account, people have written about this, my climate footprint, my carbon footprint, my effect on the climate, everything. But at some point, that can't be ad hoc anymore, right? And I'm not saying it has to be public and governmental. I think you could sort of, this could be private under duress and influence from the government, private enterprise driven. But at some point, I have to think it becomes, you've used the word fulsome several times, fulsome and cohesive instead of ad hoc.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing, and this is how I try to explain it with sort of other companies following suit. So you have big tech, you have them looking at the entire digital stack. So you have social media, you have that, sort of content moderation and censorship on those digital platforms sitting on top of the tech stack. You have the mid-tier of the tech stack, like cloud hosting services infrastructure. Parler, when Amazon Web Services decided to turn out the lights on Parler, aka withdraw their cloud hosting services infrastructure from Parler, that is when it truly went lights out. Not necessarily when the Google Play Store and the App Store were saying, no, we're not going to host this on, all of the mobile operating marketplace that we have when it comes to applications, but it was AWS, those cloud hosting services. And then you get to more foundational layers like ISPs, internet service providers. And we're starting to see not just big tech, but smaller companies, or not necessarily depending on size or revenue, but companies that are less in the news than big tech, like GoDaddy for ISPs and whatnot, already withholding their services from specific individuals because of the way that they think, because their ideology doesn't conform to, frankly, the ideological monopoly that comprises a lot of these technological companies, then that's a problem. So that's one sort of issue. And then the reason why the Twitter files are so important is because they're giving us a window into how the government leans on these private companies to withdraw their services or shape and change their behavior. And if they all think the same, which a lot of these executives do, then they're going to move in ideological concert. So you have the entirety of the technical digital stack being taken over. You have these online payment processors being taken over, like Stripe, like Shopify, all of the 17 companies that said Trump or Trump affiliated accounts after January 6th couldn't use their services.
Pinterest.
That's a big issue as well. And then, you look at, if there's talk of centralizing a centralized digital currency, centralized digital banks are what China is trying to do. So everything that you can do, everything that you can buy has to go through the centralized digital currency, or that has to be used to exchange money to actually get things. Then you're talking about, where do you have to hide? If you're not going to go homestead necessarily in a remote area of Idaho and try to scratch out a living, because you got to buy things. Some people can do that. I can't. So I think that's how you sleepwalk into that social credit system. Oh, just like in Xinjiang, you used too much toilet paper today. That's a tree you killed. You're hurting the environment. No more toilet paper for you.
But in China, I would be a victim of an authoritarian vision of the world, right? In China, whoever's counting how many pieces of paper I used that day is somehow affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party, either directly or under the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. But in pursuing the vision of this sleepwalk for Americans, what you described to me, and I want you to disavow me of this notion if I'm wrong, what I suspect is we're talking about ideological capture, meaning what you said, everybody that works at Shopify and Pinterest and Amazon Web Services and Twitter, and for that matter, Balenciaga, and hell, the NFL and USA Water Polo. There's ideological capture at almost every level of American corporatism at this point. And so what I'm trying to figure out is that our savior? Is that less dangerous than ultimately there's a centralized force in the Chinese Communist Party, or is that inevitable for us? In other words, it's inevitable that ideological capture eventually ends up under the thumb of a party or a person. Because right now it seems it's chaotic, it's groupthink.
Yes, but I think the best way of looking at this is look at what's happened to the FBI. So, when even all of this was occurring, a lot of the Twitter files was occurring when Donald Trump was still president. And that is there's an ideological delta between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, to put it mildly. Yet the FBI was working at cross purposes with let's say the ideology espoused by the Trump administration the entire time. And they're the ones with the guns. Libertarians are very fond of, the government is bad because they have the guns and they can show up at your door and they can cart you away and physically put you in jail. I would say now that life is becoming more and more digitized, that same thing can happen digitally because so much of life takes on these digital characteristics. So even if someone isn't necessarily showing up to your house with a gun, they're preventing you from buying food because of, all the PayPal nonsense and other payment processors and how we sort of bank today. Look at Wells Fargo, look at where we keep our money to actually live. So I think there's a way to for them to sort of blend together. We describe it as a sort of a symbiosis right now. They have a symbiotic relationship. I'll call it the deep state, and these companies, but you see that that's sort of the beginnings of it, right? Just because their ideology is, sort of conforming and there's still separation there, doesn't mean there's always going to be separation there. So right. The guys with the guns are going to be the guys with the centralized digital currency in the future if this isn't stopped, frankly. And your carbon footprint is going to determine what you're going to be able to do and how free you are.
And we see, by the way, the symbiosis manifest and people going back and forth. From Twitter to the FBI, back to Twitter, back to the FBI. We see that all the time. But I guess the distinguishing factor from us right now is that it's a symbiosis. It is not one and the same as it is in China. Okay, before we move back to TikTok, and I think this is going to be fascinating, I want to ask you this one more curiosity. I had somebody tell me this one time. I want to be careful because it's like if you bring up Russia now, it's such a proxy for it's a Rorschach test for other conversations. Yep. But somebody did tell me that Russia is extremely active in cyber operations, in cyber spying. You're obviously laying out China. I mean, no one ever talks about it, but Israel's very aggressive as well with international intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
The United
Pegasus.
States.
Yep.
I don't know if you can rank them, but maybe you can rank them. Like, who is most aggressive in what you did and what we're talking about here? We're putting it in the context with China. We're going to return to China here in a second. But if like an alien came down and looked at the planet and said, look at this nation state and this nation state and this nation state, who's most aggressive in spying online?
Yeah, I think China by far. And they're the most strategic as well. Russia's very good, very, very good, as we know, with the IRA, and all of their hacking operations too. And again, there's two different things at play here. There's the hard cyber concerns with, you have actual like cyber vulnerabilities and the hacking. And then there's the influence operations, the information operations. I'd say China's great at both. Russia is, really good at hacking. North Korea is really good as well. And as well as
really
Iran.
Like even when put in comparison with these other major nations we're talking about, Russia, China, USA, North Korea is an advanced nation state on this.
Oh yeah. Yep, North Korea, Iran. I would say China, then Russia, and North Korea, Iran are in there as well.
What about us in Israel? We're pretty good. Come on.
That is fair. That is fair. But I'll keep us in the good guy camp. And again, Israel. The thing that we are briefed as young intelligence officers, your number one CI threat is Israel. They're really good at what they do. I think as a nation, that's sort of born out of the conflicts that characterize the birth of that nation. So they knew they had to be good at defending themselves. And I'm all for democracy. Sitting there beset by a lot of adversaries in the Middle East.
Okay, now, what does TikTok do? It's on my phone. What is it doing? What is it capturing from me?
Yeah, so this is interesting, and like I told you on Fox and Friends that morning, is they have been open about what they are able to do when you download the application on their phone. So it is something you'll sort of hear, familiar commercial surveillance techniques, like they have access to your friends list, your contacts list. They have access to your microphone. They have access to the application operations that they're tracking you, frankly, across the web. What I think differentiates
so this is all
TikTok,
to be clear.
besides things like
these are all operations of my phone outside of the TikTok app. So when you say that, you're saying TikTok is going into my contact list, into my other apps on my phone. And so TikTok, if I have it on my phone, can go into my Yahoo Fantasy Football app and get everything it needs, right?
It depends. It depends. So it basically has sort of like the cookies that other things like Facebook would do when they track you across the web. So it's something like if you look at on Google Chrome, I'm looking at a grill, and then all of a sudden on Instagram, advertisements for grills pop up. It's sort of the same sort of that kind of issue as well. That's what it does. I think what's different, number one, besides, like I said, their algorithm, which is like their secret sauce, which is much more engaging than algorithms that Instagram and Facebook have come up with thus far. That's why it's the thing that's drawing the eyeballs of the children is the fact that it takes those and now other companies do this too. Facebook does this or other companies do this too, but the detecting keystroke rhythms, so how you actually manipulate your phone and how that can add to sort of your pattern of life. So the thing about TikTok that people say is it is basically watching how long you sort of look at and linger over a video, what your and this is contested, this hasn't been proven yet, but again, most of the things that people contest about TikTok is later proven, at least through some leak. They can basically, they're attempting to see analyze the sentiment that you're experiencing when you're looking at specific videos. That's sort of the next frontier that people have talked about. So they can serve you, more more videos that you like and maximize engagement. But if it were Facebook,
how do they measure my sentiment?
Maximizing engagement, that's a very good question. You have your camera on your phone, basically, that you use to your face to unlock it. The machine learning algorithms work off of AI optimized chips that you have in your phone. So if you have a facial recognition capability in your phone, you're using in a machine learning, which is a form of AI that basically trains and learns. So if it can detect your facial expressions, it feeds that back into the system, and then they can sort of work on those algorithms, refine those algorithms, perfect those algorithms. The more data that they're getting, the more expressions that you're getting from your phone to actually make an assessment of what this does, what this means. So it's effectively training the machine to give to I don't want to say talk to humans, but to give the engineers feedback so that they can improve the algorithms, so that it can be more accurate, so that they get more information and can make these systems better and better and better. And that's just generally how machine learning works too, and how facial recognition and the AI optimized chips in your phone work to look at your face and put it all together.
But that's not, I think you said this, that's not unique to TikTok, right? Like, for example, so what I'm getting at is, I say this to some of my friends sometimes, because, I mean, I think I can guess what your answer is going to be. I know Instagram listens to me. I know it's using its microphone, because I can literally be with my buddies having never Google searched anything, right? Look, I don't think I was actually looking at different guns to buy all morning long, so I can't do that. That's the first thing that popped into my head. So they're legal. But I can think of something. I can talk to somebody in the car about something I have not researched on Google, and I will get an Instagram ad for that thing. I know Instagram is using my microphone, and they are listening.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the sort of the best illustration. I pulled up an old report that I wrote where there was a German researcher, and I think it was maybe like 6 years ago. What he basically did is he installed 14 applications on his phone in a 24-hour period, and he found that the data transmissions were over 7,000 to 636 servers in that 24-hour period, including 65% of transmissions that occurred while his screen was locked and 18% overnight. So that is just 14 apps and over 7,000 data transmissions to 636 servers within a 24-hour period. So you're walking around with TikTok on your phone, and I mean, the transmissions, it is beyond belief, given the terabytes of data, frankly, that are going to be floating around soon. So China is looking to scoop up that data. They're looking to integrate it with other data that they already have from U.S. citizens, and what they're trying to do with it is map out patterns of life, map out networks, and effectively use it to control the rest of us in whatever manner that they see fit, however they can. Frankly.
Okay, so let's go through. I'm going to ask you a series of short burst questions, and you tell me, in your estimation, whether or not this TikTok is spying in this manner on me through my phone. Same thing. The same thing I just described with Instagram. Is TikTok accessing my microphone to listen to me and then help compile, like you said, a pattern of life for me that they can either feed me ads or Chinese Communist Party influence videos or whatever it may be? Are they using the microphone to listen to me?
They're accessing your microphone. And technically you agree to it when you accept their terms of service. And this is what they hide behind always.
And they're also, okay, next. I think you just told us the answer to this. They're accessing my video camera. So they can literally watch me when I don't know that they are, when I don't have the TikTok app open and my camera opened within it, I just have my phone. They can access that camera anytime they want and watch me.
That we cannot prove it, but they can access the camera, and I, out of an abundance of caution, would act like they can access that camera whenever they want. And they have good software engineers too, who can do things that maybe their terms of service wouldn't say that they're doing. Like that would be hacking activity.
Wow. Okay. Can TikTok access my passwords and usernames, for example, my bank app on my phone?
Good question. Not proven, but I would be very careful.
You're just going to leave it there? You'd be very careful?
I think I told you on the program too, it's you basically have to treat this application as a Chinese spyware app. So you have to assume that everything that they say in their terms of service, they're doing, and then some, and the Chinese party state has access to whatever information that yields. You just have to do it. And I'll make comparisons here. I don't think we talked about this, but after I worked for the intelligence community, I worked for Facebook at their Menlo Park headquarters in California. And, these companies, even if you delete your profile, they maintain that pattern of life that they got from you when you were active on the app. So they're able to basically have a snapshot of your digital life and your digital activity because you downloaded it just once. I'm not saying that it's current and they can draw real-time information. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that they have at least a snapshot of your digital life because merely for the fact that you downloaded it once.
That's one thing you did tell me that scared me. That is one thing that terrified me. I have TikTok on my phone. I downloaded it out of curiosity. I don't even know if I ever created a username and a profile, or I definitely has never uploaded anything. I don't even think I ended up scrolling through it. Maybe I did. I don't know. But it's totally inactive on my phone.
Well, that
you
IP
told me
address
that doesn't matter.
That IP address that you used when you downloaded it and started working through TikTok, now it knows that you are in the Manhattan area and pinged off this IP.
Okay, and so
they got a piece of you forever, Will.
and by the way, so you're telling me if I delete it, they may not. Will they? They have a snapshot in time for me, and it's probably been on my phone for years. They have a pretty good snapshot in time of me. But if I delete it, is it over, or they continue to harvest data from me?
We cannot prove that. I cannot say that I've seen the back end clearly of TikTok, so I cannot say with confidence that is the case. But there are ways to do that. Good programmers could get after that information. I do not know if TikTok does that. But
continue
again,
to spy after the app is deleted.
Out of an abundance of caution, I would just act like you gave China a window into your digital life.
And you told me the only way to change that would be to basically throw my phone in the lake and get a new one.
There's as targeters who like to use specific information, I don't want to give you too much info, but in this instance, I think the damage at this point has been done. It could always be worse. You could have it live on your phone. So it's better deleted than having it on your phone, but better not to delete it or not to download it at all.
Oh my gosh, Kara. Okay, finally, I want to ask you this, okay? Because I think everybody listening, and I have a child who did have TikTok. I told him about your and my conversation, and he deleted it.
Good man.
He's probably going to download it again in a year or two when everybody else is talking about what they saw on TikTok. But what does it matter, Kara? Like, okay, here's one of the attitudes that people definitely come across, right? Okay, I don't ever plan to run for political office. Not doing anything illegal, And let's be real about something, okay? Can we just be phones? I'm not saying this is me. I'm not saying this is everybody. Phones are pornography devices we've seen the stats on this, right? The stats are overwhelming, right? Like, I don't know what percentage. But, okay, why do I care what, at this point, it feels like the world is awash in data. And I really can't avoid being part of that data ocean. Why do I care? What does it hurt me if somebody has this information on me?
Yeah, I think if you don't want to be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party state in some capacity, because they have designs on the rest of the world, they're not just confining it to the internal stability of China, that you want to keep yourself control free, then you don't download TikTok. So there are national security issues, and that's one of them. You don't want to be exploited later. You don't want to be in blackmail. You don't have to be doing anything wrong necessarily to be blackmailed. Again, your dad could have worked for the government and been hacked in the OPM leak or the Marriott leak, because we know a lot of government actors stay at Marriott's. There's an intent to what China does, or the Equifax, the Anthem, all of that, and they are going to blackmail him. So espionage is one thing too. You don't necessarily have to be a person who's trying to run for president. That was something I tried to illustrate when we were doing a 60 Minutes on this years ago. If your kid ever wants to hold public office or whatnot, they're going to be in the clutches of the Chinese Party state. Eric Swalwell-esque.
Look at this porn you looked at. You want to be president? Like that's pretty simple, right? But that's just one, you're saying, of hundreds of ways they can say, look at this person that you love, what they did, whatever it may be.
Family members. And also, and this is the biggest thing for me. It is the fact that it is tearing at the moral fabric of our nation, and that they've captured the youth, frankly, of our nation, and they are pumping censored information. The values direction is going in the wrong way. They're pumping Chinese values, pro-CCP narratives into this application. They're censoring specific information about Tiananmen Square, about the Hong Kong protests, Tibetan freedom, et cetera, et cetera. And they're pushing these
sowing
social
division
contagions.
In the United States?
Sowing division, exactly. And then, you look at how it surfaces suicidal content super quickly, much more so than most of the applications, even what we've seen on Instagram or given the whistleblower documents. It surfaces the physical tics and those behaviors. So girls that went into Texas hospitals, what the Wall Street Journal reported on this last October, or the October before last, and they basically said the thing that was in common for these girls visiting the hospital with these physical tics was they all followed the same TikTok influencers. So that
really?
To me, it is much more intangible than some of the espionage, the blackmail concerns, the data access, and what they can do with their data once it's integrated and they have a perfect profile on you. Turning on and off switches and access to specific digital services is something down the line that could potentially be possible. So setting that aside, you have the moral implications of this app that I think are much more odious than what they can do necessarily to your data, which they could do a lot, prevent you from carrying out your life that takes on increasingly digital characteristics. And the fact that our children children. I'm a new mom, and it absolutely terrifies me, the fact that most of children are using this application, that most adults are getting their news from this application when it's, covered in CCP valence. So it's a little bit squishier, but I do not want to see anyone take their kids into the hospital because they have an eating disorder because of the videos that they are seeing over and over and over again on TikTok. I don't want to have another mother take her daughter to a hospital because of the physical tics that she somehow is suddenly exhibiting because of the videos that are surfaced on TikTok by their algorithm. There should be a Moms Against TikTok movement because what our children are being poisoned by the ideology of the CCP, and it's in the pockets of American citizens that it's non-negotiable to me. That is absolutely the worst thing that TikTok brings to the table. So it should not be operating in the United States, period.
Pretty terrifying when you consider the fact that on average, I believe American children are on TikTok 45 minutes a day. Last question for you, Kara. I just heard you. You do not believe TikTok should be operating in the United States of America. Several government agencies have now banned TikTok for their government phones. I saw a Forbes prediction for 2023 that Apple would take TikTok off the App Store. What do you think is the future of TikTok? Will it be essentially banned in the United States?
I would like to say yes, but I opened the podcast saying that everybody knows all there is to know about TikTok and its perniciousness, and any blindness toward it going forward is willful. But I think what I live in DC, so this is, kind of the bubble that I live in, but the people who don't necessarily know what TikTok is, like you said, correcting me rightly so at the beginning, I unfortunately think that until there's enough of a clamor in the grassroots that the Biden administration, whoever wins the presidency come 2024 and then 2025, unless they actually are frankly made to care, then they probably won't move too many mountains. Biden rescinded Donald Trump's executive order and said that he would implement a risk-based framework to deal with this. Nothing's happened. So I think, frankly, they're too concerned with what TikTok influencers can do by poking their heads out of doors in the White House and help them win their political battles than they are for the moral character of this nation's children. So until a warrior and a champion who actually understands the threat is able to actually do something, I'm not sure much more beyond the federal bans on devices are going to happen. But the state attorneys generals are also and legislatures are moving out on this as well, and governors. So they can, I think, do a lot in that case, and they should. So more action is needed. We can't surrender the futures of our children to China and digital platforms.
Well, unfortunately, the history of weaponry hasn't been that any nation state or any leader has ever said that's too dangerous to exist. It's largely been, that's really dangerous. How can I get my hands on it? And so you would suspect that human nature is what it is, and that the instinct of an American politician isn't to get rid of this, but how can I harness this to my power? And I think we've already begun to see that. As you said earlier, we've begun to see how big tech and political ideologies and political parties have started that symbiosis towards not eradicating this weapon, but getting their hands on this weapon. All right, Kara, like I said, it's terrifying. TikTok. Thank you so much for your time and expertise today. Kara. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.